News over the past week was that Dick Cheney endorsed Kamala Harris for president. I think for people who see the world in partisan political terms, this might have been surprising, but I don't think that you guys were that surprised by that. Do you see an underlying logic to this? Jeff, why don't I start with you?
I think it's obvious. There's basically one deep state party, and that is the party of Cheney, Harris, Biden, Victoria Nuland, my colleague at Columbia University now. And Nuland is kind of the face of all of this because she has been in every administration for the last 30 years. She was in the Clinton administration, wrecking our policies towards Russia in the 1990s. She was in the Bush administration, Jr., with Cheney, wrecking our policies towards NATO enlargement. She was in then the Obama administration as Hillary's spokesperson first, and then making a coup in Ukraine in February 2014. Not a great move. Started a war. Then she was Biden's Undersecretary of State. Now, that's both parties. It's a colossal mess, and she's been Cheney's advisor. She's been Biden's advisor. She makes perfect sense. This is the reality. We're trying to find out if there's another party. That's the big question.
John, what's your thought on that? Do you see any difference between Republicans and Democrats?
No, I like to refer to the Republicans and the Democrats as Tweedledee and Tweedledum. There's hardly any difference. I actually think the one exception is that former President Trump, when he became president in 2017, was bent on beating back the deep state and becoming a different kind of leader on the foreign policy front. But he basically failed. And he has vowed that if he gets elected this time, it will be different, and he will beat back the deep state. He will pursue a foreign policy that's fundamentally different than Republicans and Democrats have pursued up to now. And the big question on the table is whether or not you think Trump can beat the deep state and these two established parties. And I'd bet against Trump.
John, and Jeff, but let's start with John. Can you actually define for us? For me, I don't understand when people say deep state what it is. I almost view the term comically. We have one of our friends in our group chat who we call deep state, who is...
Deep state?
He's really in the deep state. But we say it as a joke. But for maybe the uninitiated, what does it actually mean? What are their incentives? Who are they? Jeff, maybe you want to start, or John, you want to start?
Yeah, I'll say a few words about it. When we talk about the deep state, we're talking really about the administrative state. It's very important to understand that starting in the late 19th, early 20th century, given developments in the American economy, it was imperative that we develop, and this was true of all Western countries, a very powerful central state that could run the country. And over time, that state has grown in power. And since World War II, the United States, as you all know, has been involved in every nook and cranny of the world, fighting wars here, there, and everywhere. And to do that, you need a very powerful administrative state that can help manage that foreign policy. But in the process, what happens is you get all of these high-level bureaucrats, middle-level and low-level bureaucrats who become established in positions in the Pentagon, the State Department, the intelligence community, you name it. And they end up having a vested interest in pursuing a particular foreign policy. And the particular foreign policy that they like to pursue is the one that the Democrats and the Republicans are pushing. And that's why we talk about Tweedledee and Tweedledum with regard to the two parties. You could throw in the deep state as being on the same page as those other two institutions.
Yeah, there's a very interesting interview of Putin in Figaro in 2017. And he says, I've dealt with 3 presidents now. They come into office with some ideas even. But then the men in the dark suits and the blue ties, and then he says, I wear red ties, but they wear blue ties. They come in and explain the way the world really is. And there go the ideas. And I think that's Putin's experience. That's our experience. That's my experience, which is that there's a deeply entrained foreign policy. It has been in place, in my interpretation, for many decades, but arguably a variant of it has been in place since 1992. I got to watch some of it early on because I was an advisor to Gorbachev and I was an advisor to Yeltsin. And so I saw early makings of this, though I didn't fully understand it except in retrospect. But that policy has been mostly in place pretty consistently for 30 years, and it didn't really matter whether it was Bush Sr., whether it was Clinton, whether it was Bush Jr., whether it was Obama, whether it was Trump. After all, who did Trump hire? He hired John Bolton. Well, the pretty deep state. That was the end of, they told, he explained this is the way it is. And by the way, Bolton explained also in his memoirs, when Trump didn't agree, we figured out ways to trick him, basically. So,
well, and what are their incentives? Is it war? Is it self-enrichment? Is it power? Is it all three? Is it some combination?
Or is there a philosophical entrenchment? Or is it just this inertial issue that, like, once a policy begins, it's hard to change and the system's just working with 10,000 people working towards it?
If I were lucky to sit next to the world's greatest political philosopher, which I am, he'd give you a good answer, which is the right answer, which is if you want to interpret American foreign policy, it is to maximize power. John gives an explanation of that. We have some differences, but I think it's a very good description of American foreign policy, which is that it's trying to maximize global power, essentially to be global hegemon. I think it could get us all killed. This is because it's a little bit delusional in my mind, but not his interpretation of their idea, but the fact that they hold that idea is a little weird to me. But in any event, that's the idea. And every time a decision comes inside that I've seen, I'm an economist, so I don't see the security decisions the same way. But every decision that I've seen always leans in the same direction for the last 30 years, which is power as the central objective. So Clinton faced an internal cabinet, really, debate, should NATO be enlarged?
This is a post-Cold War phenomenon?
I'll let John take that.
Just two very quick points. First of all, I do believe that the people who are in favor of this foreign policy do believe in it. It's not cynical. They really believe that we're doing the right thing.
I've met them, yeah.
The second point I would make to you, and this sort of adds on to what Jeff said. Jeff said power has a lot to do with this, and as a good realist, I of course believe that. But it's also very important to understand that the United States is a fundamentally liberal country, and we believe that we have a right, we have a responsibility, and we have the power to run around the world and remake the world in America's image. Most people in the foreign policy establishment, the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, they believe that. And that is what has motivated our foreign policy in large part since the Cold War ended. Because remember, when the Cold War ends, we have no rival great power left. So what are we going to do with all this power that we have? What we decide to do is go out and remake the world in our own image.
So that's a values point of view, though, right? That there are values that they hold dear, that many do hold dear, that liberalism, democracy does ultimately, I believe I've heard this, reduce conflict worldwide, that there's an importance that we've never seen two democratic nations since World War II go to war, and that there's a reason why we want to see liberalism kind of breed throughout the world, and it's our responsibility for global peace to make that a mandate.
Let me step in for one moment. Okay, sure,
Jeremy,
please.
very quickly.
And by the way, what do you call it? Where you pull the spirits of the voice of others? But I'm just trying to channeling. That's the word.
I want to be very clear. I am forever thankful that I was born in a liberal democracy, and I love liberalism. But the question here is, do you think that we can run around the world imposing liberal democracy on other countries, and in some cases shoving it down their throat, doing it at the end of a rifle barrel. And my argument is that's almost impossible to do. It almost always backfires. Think Iraq, Afghanistan, so forth and so on. And secondly, you begin to erode liberalism in the United States because you build a deep state, right? And you want to understand that a lot of the complaints here about cracking down on freedom of speech and so forth and so on are related to the fact that we have this ambitious foreign policy. Those two things go together in very important ways.
What an irony.
Let me disagree just a bit, because we agree actually on the behavior, and I've learned, I'd say most of that from you, that it's power seeking. Truly, John, in my work, 40 years overseas, I don't think the U.S. government gives a damn about these other places. I don't think they really care if it's a liberal democracy, if it's a dictatorship. They want the right of ways. They want the military bases. They want the state to be in support of the United States. They want NATO enlargement. I know you've written, and there are some who believe in state building. God, if they do, they are so incompetent, it's unbelievable. But
Professor Sachs,
I'll give you an example if I could. Just one example. I'm a friend with one of the only PhD Afghani economists, senior person in the U.S. Academia over the last 30 years. You would think that the State Department, if they were interested in state building, would ask him one day, one moment, something about Afghanistan. Never happened. Never happened.
Not even one question.
Never happened. He asked me, can you get me a meeting with the State Department? They were completely uninterested. This is about power. You're too idealistic, John. They don't care about the other places. They may feel we should be whatever we want, free and so forth, but freedom, I've seen with my own eyes the coups, the overthrows, the presidents, Democratic presidents led away. They don't care at all. This is Washington. Be a realist. Come on.
Professor